Welcome to the Hedera HashCast, Episode 1. I'm Jake, your host, also known as Warlock and Key. In this episode, we'll be discussing the recent big news. Hedera Hashgraph is open source? What? I'm joined today by Mei Chan.
Hello.
DPAK.
Hello.
Hashgraphian.
How's it going?
And our moderator, Leemonade, who is in charge of keeping the fact that I don't really know anything a secret. And I also interrupted his greeting, and we just did it again, and we're going to keep going. Let's start with a warm-up. If you were just made the CEO of Disney, what is the first thing you would try to implement? Personally, I don't know if you've seen The Black Cauldron. It's an older Disney film. Some consider it one of the films that convinced Disney to stop doing 2D animation, along with Home on the Range and Princess and the Frog. Anyway, I really like it. I think it's cool, and I think if they're going to go back and do a bunch of these dumb live-action remakes, perfect material for something actually interesting that we haven't seen in a while and could be fleshed out for adult audiences. I would also probably build a dark ride for it. All right, what about you guys?
I would go for world domination if I became part of or head of Disney. Like, I think at that point I'm at a platform such that I could go for the world.
I said a new thing.
I mean, world domination is relatively new, you know, like it hasn't been done yet.
No, I mean, Disney's kind of already working on that. I mean, they bought Fox, you know, maybe they'll try to buy Microsoft next.
No, but I would like try to get an army of mercenaries and shit, and then like have my Disney militia, and then go for the world.
Would your hats have the Mickey Mouse ears on them?
Yes, essential.
But they'd be tactical helmets, right?
Yeah.
May, what do you think?
If I was the head CEO of Disney, I don't know what I would do with that power.
I got something.
Is there anything you would cancel? Is there anything you would say, no more? That's just a soft way of asking. Is there any Disney stuff you hate? Do you hate Marvel movies? Do you love them? Are you going to say, we're bringing Thanos back, but he's going to win this time? I might want to do that.
No, I've got no controversial opinions about Disney. I like their stuff. I like their Pixar movies.
Great. That's, you know, as host, that's
I'm too wholesome. I'm too wholesome for this conversation.
We should have gone back to the what color are your school studies notebooks type stuff, you know?
Now
keep
that
it simple.
Was a question.
That was a good question. I'll work on it. All right, let's get right into it. Okay. I'm sorry. Never mind.
What?
Oh, do you have a response? What would you do?
Since I'm a game developer, I'd probably like reboot an old series, something like that's like some sort of cult classic into a game. I think that's
I would
what
make
I would do.
Smash Bros. Disney.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Where was that earlier?
I would make a battle royale of all the Disney characters, and they would shoot each other.
Oh no.
They'd fly into Disneyland in like a metaverse world of Disneyland, and you'd pick up drops and you'd shoot each other.
As long as I can dab as Mickey Mouse, I'm in.
Hey, that works.
All right, well, now let's get into it. On January 19th, Hedera announced that the Hedera Governing Council officially voted to purchase the intellectual property rights to the Hashgraph consensus algorithm, and that they would transition their code to an open source model this year under the Apache 2.0 license. They are also transferring CEO Mance Harmon and Chief Scientist Dr. Lehman Baird from Hedera to Swirlds, Inc. as the CEO and Chief Technology Officer, respectively. Now, we're going to get into what the transition to open source entails and what it means for Hedera's future in a bit. But the first thing I want to ask all of you is, why did this happen? And why now?
I mean, if you've listened to Lehman's talks in the past, this has always been the plan. They've always planned to decentralize the governing council and get themselves off of the leadership position and give the reins to the council as a whole. So this actually isn't a surprise at all, and it's basically a sign that they've done all of the steps that they've needed to, and now they're ready to pass the reins. It's actually a very well-planned part of their roadmap.
Do you have anything to add, Hashgraphian?
Yeah, it seems pretty exciting because one, everybody perceives like crypto, like the overall optics of crypto, that it's all open source, and like functionally Hashgraph, like it pretty much was, since it was open review and all the code could have been looked at. But there was just always this sticking point that people got with the patent, and it drove a lot of people away that would have otherwise been more interested in the ecosystem. So hopefully that development will attract more developers overall, just to like get rid of that sort of like fake stigma. And I think it could be really positive overall.
I think the timing is interesting, but I've heard a lot of people ask, why not sooner? You know, why hasn't this been announced sooner? Why did it take this long?
Or along the same lines, what was the catalyst that caused it? You know, from what a lot of people at Hedera have stated publicly, or a few of them, is that it was brought to their attention at the last moment. There was nothing apparently that led up to it, no advanced discussion or anything of that nature. So yeah, I get what you're saying, Jake. Was there a catalyst? Was there something going on behind the scenes that led up to this sudden change?
It feels like so with the same thing with the HBAR Foundation, it kind of feels like Leeman's like Dumbledore, you know, like he's just kind of making like, oh, like today we're gonna do this, and then it's just like totally changing thing, and that nobody's aware about, which is kind of cool in my opinion.
I mean, it can't be a coincidence that oh, sorry.
No, you go on. Sorry.
It can't be a coincidence that the network is just about to come out of beta. Like the timing is just too perfect. So I think that the governing council has just made the decision based on that.
Also know that smart contracts are live in testnet as of last week, which coincides very closely to this announcement. And smart contracts is one of the big features that Hedera has been gearing up for a long time. And now that they have smart contracts out, they are doing marketing on Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow. And it seems like that's the start of a new
approach,
a new campaign, a new direction for Hedera. And so it's probably driven a lot by the tech that they are pulling out, although maybe it's also there's some deals in the background that we don't know about. It's very hard to speculate why, because Hedera doesn't really talk about those things. They kind of just do the Dumbledore thing and announce what they're doing. Yeah.
May I speculate for a moment?
Absolutely.
I think we're gonna see some crazy shit, and I'll tell you why. Mance has hair now. Why else would he suddenly have hair all the time? You know, like he obviously, like maybe he's about to get some, you know, public attention. That's just my take.
It is an odd and sudden change.
It was out of nowhere.
Maybe their technology is interacting with stem cells or something to regrow that hair. I mean, certainly it wouldn't just be a toupee. I mean, that's
no, it couldn't be.
No.
No, Mance wouldn't do this like that.
No.
Maybe his hair is connected to the total TPS on the network, and by 2025 he'll have a full-on beard.
Oh my gosh. He'll probably look like an 80s rock star by then.
Gosh. Well, what do you guys think? What do you guys think of the hair? Any thoughts?
Mance might hear this, so it should be nice.
I mean, it already coincides with the TPS and the testnet. I mean...
I'm glad he took like a very bold approach. I'm not sure if I'm sold on the hairdo specifically, but like definitely like big balls to do that. Shout out to Mance, huge Mance fan. He's gonna kill it. He's gonna look good on television eventually, for sure.
Yeah, it's possible he knows his roles is how much he's going to be appearing on TV and whatnot is going to increase soon. So perhaps that's why he wants that to be his look.
That's what I'm saying, man. He might be the richest man in the year. That's mega hopium, but because that means that hopefully we'll all be rich by then. But yeah, let's fingers crossed that
Fingers crossed.
there's going to be a lot of attention on him.
So on that note, we're assuming, or we're saying that Mance is going to have a lot of attention on him. It's very interesting because with all of the Swirlds employees being moved, or sorry, all of the Hedera employees being moved to Swirlds, that kind of, I've heard that they are looking to do more development on the app side. I'm not sure what exactly they have planned, but it's, if they're stepping down from the governance of Hedera and moving more into development, that's a very interesting thing to note, that Mance seems to be gearing up for something very big.
New direction for Hedera, new direction for Mance's head. Now, immediately after the announcement, personally, I saw quite a bit of negative sentiment from the Hedera community. I'm talking right after. Why do you think that was?
In our blood.
It is definitely, the FUD is in our blood. But there was some specific stuff brought up. A lot of people, of course, were upset. And maybe they didn't truly understand what was going on with Mance Harmon and Leeman Baird leaving Hedera. What do you guys feel about that? How do you feel about that?
Well, it seems like they're still going to be playing the same roles overall. Like, it's going to be a little bit different, but they're still going to be key players in like the overall development of the network. And I think a lot of people were just worried because the patent protected the algorithm, but then we know that, like, they said that it's not necessary to have the patent anymore. It doesn't need to be protected anymore. It's far enough along now that that doesn't seem to be a concern anymore for the governing council.
That was definitely one of the big things that was the basis of a lot of the FUD, was that now the platform is open source. Now all of the GC members can drum up their own Hedera network and run it, and therefore the actual HBAR isn't going to be a big thing. And anyone who is trying to push that narrative doesn't really understand how Hedera actually works. The strength of Hedera right now isn't just in the technology. It's not just in the security and the speed and the ABFT-ness and all of that. It's also with how it's governed and how it's managed, right? So if a GC member, let's say, I don't know, someone even as big as IBM or Google goes rogue and starts up their own network, that network is going to be centralized. It's going to be controlled by a smaller and less distributed group of people. And that's going to affect the security of the network, the fake network. And in the meantime, the main Hedera network is still going to go strong, right? There's a reason why Mance and Leeman set up the network this way, and why it's totally safe for them to release the code. And also what Hashgraphian said earlier about it going from open review to open source, a lot of people don't understand what that means, where the code for the consensus algorithm was public. It's always been public, and that's what open review means. And open source just means that people can now contribute to the repository, right? People can now put branches off of the Hedera code and submit them for changes and participate in the development of it. And that wasn't possible before. So really, if we're talking about the difference between open review and open source, for most people, there's actually no difference. And that's something that a lot of the FUD try to exaggerate and make it a big deal. But in reality, the code's always been out there and always been able to be reviewed.
Thank you for that. I think that was a pretty good overview. Yeah, I would say that was the dominant concern a lot of people had, other than just being sad that things are changing. Personally, how do each of you feel about the move to open source? Just in your gut.
It's going to be great. I feel really good about it myself. Like, I don't think all these companies are going to put so much time into developing these use cases. And like you can go back into the Hedera minutes to see which companies are participating in the meetings, and like even companies that we regularly don't hear from at all about, like with Hedera, they're all like the majority of them are always active in these meetings. So I'm sure that they all have a lot of cool stuff coming down the pipeline. Plus, we have like the remittances and stuff. Like they're not just going to give up on that stuff. I think that they want to attract developers and just expand the ecosystem. And that's my gut feeling with it.
DPAK?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a pretty common pattern for technology giants or big people in tech to just open source their technology, even though it might benefit them. This is very, very common. For Hedera, I'm sure this means that they have some other controls in which they can guarantee that the network won't fork. There is actually a town hall where Leeman addresses this. He says that the patent is going to expire in like 40 years anyway, and you have the council members that are going to sign off on each transaction. So even if the network were to be forked, you don't have those you don't have the council signing off on those transactions, which, like May had mentioned, that's like that's a huge deal. It's not all about the technology; it's also about the legal controls that these people have. So, I don't want to say whether it's bullish or bearish. I just think it's just something that happened, and it's indicative of their confidence. Also, I'm sure that my boy Charles Hoskinson, his FUD of Hedera being centralized garbage, that maybe that had to do with it. He is quite the powerful man.
Yeah, I'm sure he was directly involved in this decision. That was what I was building up with some of the conspiracy theories I had. Why now? Obviously, Charles is about to enter the council. What does this mean for the future of Hedera? Looking ahead into developments, new stuff coming out, new people signing on. Is this going to be helpful for some of the issues we've actually pointed out in the last podcast or our test podcast?
Potentially. Yeah. Go on, May.
So one of the things that I think it was actually in the original press release was that the Hedera code going open source is actually really good for enterprises who are looking to adopt the network. And I think that the way that we can look into this is that if a GC member or an enterprise wants to build something on Hedera that is a key feature that they need in order to push out their use case, now that the code is open source, they can develop that code and then push it to the repository and have it be reviewed by the group of people that are maintaining it, and then have it be implemented and thus have their solution be supported, right? So I think that going open source really opens a lot of doors for enterprise and gives them the power and the methods to support their use cases where the network doesn't currently support them. And that's a very big thing, and probably is one of the main drivers of why they're making it open source right now, so that their enterprise clients can really build and develop the network so that they can use it.
That's a great thing to bring up. Also, a quote that my beautiful boy Leemonade just shared with me, I think would be good to read, from Scott Thiel. I think that's how his last name is pronounced. That's a complete guess. He said, "In purchasing and making open source the underlying Hashgraph algorithm will ensure that network development continues to be collaboratively produced, shared freely, published transparently, and developed for the good of the community. The ongoing collaboration between members of the council, including Swirls, gives us the best structure to facilitate exponential growth of the world's most advanced public ledger infrastructure." So what do we think about that?
That's actually a really good point. I know that the Hedera group has the HIP, what's it called? The HIP procedures where you can, as a community member, put out a suggestion to be implemented in the hash graph, but I can't recall seeing the actual work that's being done on the underlying code and seeing the branches of the developers as they're working on them. So right now, it could be that the code that Hedera is developing for the network can be viewed more transparently. And so people who are, or enterprises who are building on it can see what's coming down the pipeline even more transparently and plan accordingly or influence it accordingly and provide their input.
It seems like this will be a great boon for community developers as well. Would that be accurate to say?
I think that community developers wouldn't be involved in the hash graph as deeply as that. And Hedera has always been extremely open to community involvement, and the Hedera Improvement Protocol has always been a very good way to interact with them on a very technical level. So I think that it's really an underlying sort of change and an enterprise-focused change than anything else.
I was going to ask a question, and this might be off topic. I was going to discuss how Swirlds, the company that Lehman and Mance and everybody that's doing maintenance on the network is moving to, they mentioned that they're going to be just developing tools. I was kind of curious, and I want to ask this to May. Do you expect that they're going to create like their own wallet? And just for context for everybody, May is the CEO of HashPack, the premier HBAR wallet.
Let me answer this carefully and say that I haven't been in talks with Hedera on the topic of development of their own wallet, and that I think that if they are going to do that, the best move would be to buy HashPack and then develop that as their own wallet. I don't think that it makes sense for Hedera to put out a new product that is just going to redo a lot of the work that we've done. And I say this in the most practical way, I guess. There's certainly a bit of ego and pride in developing a wallet like this and putting it out there. But I think that, if Hedera wants to build tools, they shouldn't try to reinvent the wheel. They should either leverage the existing products or build something completely new. And I know that, Lehman has got to have a million ideas of what he could build. So he could do anything he wants. There's no reason for him to make yet another wallet for the ecosystem.
I also think this whole thing is, I don't know much about the specifics when it comes to underlying structure of the code, but I think this is a great opportunity marketing-wise and messaging-wise to take this new step of transparency into how they handle their marketing and messaging, which, we've talked about at length, so we don't need to readdress any of it. But I'm hoping that this could be a turning point for some of the messaging and marketing that comes out of Hedera. If not being built into this announcement, hopefully it can be inspired by it.
Yeah, I know that the HBAR Foundation, I'm not sure if they have a CMO yet. The last time Shane talked about it, they wanted to find like a really good fit for that position. And then like you see the messaging change with Hedera's Twitter account. Like it made like a stark change as soon as they announced they're going open source. And then you have Lehman and Mance have talked about interoperability standards too. So maybe they're going to try to create a standard and standardize like interoperability in their new positions.
For our listeners, what is this stark change that you observed in the Hedera Twitter account for people who might not be very closely following?
Just like, I don't know, like more Twitter speak, more emojis and stuff. Just higher frequency and
a more casual approach, maybe a lower brow approach, not so quite as stilted.
Who's running that Twitter now that there are just no positions on Hedera anymore? I guess it's people on the HBAR Foundation.
I have no idea.
Are you talking about the official Hedera Twitter account?
Yeah, the official Hedera Twitter account.
I mean, I would imagine it's the same employee and whatever their new role is at Swirl. At Swirls, yeah.
Centralized, man. Centralized Twitter account. Not gonna make it.
Yeah, we need a community Twitter account where one person from the community every day is chosen to run it. I'm sure that would go very well.
Oh yeah, that would go great. You know, I actually had a question. Maybe May, you could touch on this. We could discuss it a little bit further because I think other members of the community might have the same question. But when the Hashgraph was open review versus open source, and we had the Hedera improvement process to make changes, how does that differ between it now being open source as far as those changes taking place?
I mean, I think that it's just a matter of how deep into the code base you want to get. If you're working with the Hashgraph consensus algorithm repo itself, then you are working with the foundations of the whole network, right? So you have to be pretty technically inclined, and you probably know people at Hedera already because you're working with them and you're building and you know what you're doing, right? Whereas the HIP procedure is more about you're a community member and you need some sort of thing implemented, and you have some ideas, but you don't really know how to get them done, or you need some help from the Hedera team itself. And so you put it out there and they get back to you, and you can have discussions with the developers on the repo itself, and people work together and collaboratively build a plan to make a change on the network. And then that gets implemented by the Hedera team, right? So you're not actually directly coding on the code base when you're using the HIP procedure.
Okay.
Right. And that just makes it super accessible, right? That gives the community a way to interact with the development of the network, and it's actually really good.
So in a sense, with the Hedera improvement process, changes can be suggested, and then they work collaboratively toward actually making that happen, versus now being open source, the changes can be brought forward more directly. Is that kind of how it is?
It is, and it's also just, like I said, a difference in quality of what kind of changes you're bringing about, right? So, and I guess you could say how direct, right? So let's say I just put out a HIP for a mirror node endpoint for NFTs, and I don't know how the mirror nodes work. I don't know what the guts are, but I do know that I want to be able to go to a mirror node and get the information from the mirror node, and get all of the tokens in an account. And that's really what I want. And I have an idea of what format that's going to be in. And so I posted the HIP, had some discussions, and now it's live. And whoever implements that is going to have to go into the mirror node code itself and do the changes. Whereas if I were perhaps more technically inclined or wanted to do things more hands-on, now that the code is open source, theoretically, what I would do is I would take a branch of that open source repo, code in that endpoint myself, and then push it with a request to review. And then they would review my code directly and maybe implement it or, iterate on it as necessary. So it's really a question of how deep in the code do you want to do it, and how much interaction you need in order to get it done.
Well, that explains it. Thank you. That really clears it up. So it really makes sense. It's really going to, like they said, enable broader community participation.
That's my theory. I don't know exactly how it all works. That's just my speculation on what this open sourceness means for everybody. But I think that it should be pretty close. And if I'm wrong, someone can just tweet me and let me know how I'm wrong. That's fine too.
I think it'll speed things up too, because correct me if I'm wrong, I think HIPs have to be voted on by the council members.
Some of them do. Yeah, some of them. So this mirror node one, even though it doesn't affect GCs at all, even though it's just another endpoint, apparently it has to be voted on. But, I imagine any underlying change to the consensus algorithm repo, that's going to need sign off from a number of people, right? And those people are the ones that are delegated to be trusted for the changes. And there's probably a tech council as well that handles changes to the repo. So it's not like it's open source and anyone can make any changes whatever they want, right? It's still going to be signed off on. So really, it's a tool for the very technical minded enterprises that really want to get in there and make changes and make improvements.
All right, well, let's just go ahead and take our little podcast halftime break. Please keep in mind this podcast was sponsored by Cretes. Wouldn't it be neat to buy a Crete? All right, and we're back. Let's talk about the state of the market. And don't just scream.
Big doomp.
Big
doomp.
I just can't believe they crashed the market again just because Hedera went open source. Every time Hedera has good news, they just crash the market. I can see the pattern now. I see what
you're not
doing.
wrong.
It seems with
wrong.
few exceptions, news generally doesn't move the market as far as Hedera is concerned, with very few exceptions. Google perhaps being one of them.
Do you guys think we're in a bear market? No?
I'm not sold on it yet.
Yeah, I think we're holding this level really well. I mean, the RSI is like bottomed out for Bitcoin, and like it's still just like fighting for this level. Like it went down to like 34 momentarily, but then it went back to like 35, 36, and I don't know. With the RSI being so low on everything I'm looking at, we could recover, but it's yet to be seen. It could go either way.
I'm going to say that we're going to recover because I want that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
It's really interesting being in this time because I remember when the COVID crash happened. You know, I think when it bottomed out, everybody was convinced like we're gonna go even more down, and it just shot up. And so and it was like a very short amount of time. It was like a week. So I'm so interested to see what'll happen because it really could just go down. Bitcoin could really just shit the bed and go down to like 10 grand. I think that could happen. But I also think HBAR or any other coin, depending on what's going on with it, could pump significantly, you know? I'm really curious to see if this is like an inflection point in which we finally decouple from King Shitcoin.
Wouldn't that be something? So, you know, obviously everything's down right now. So it's not exactly easy to see, like Hashgraphian was touching on, see the impact of this news when the entire market is down. Longer term, how do you think this new transition by Hedera to open source and all these other initiatives and things that they're teasing or rolling out will impact the price of HBAR? Will it be like previous news where it doesn't do much, or will it have some kind of accumulation effect where people start taking Hedera more seriously? What do you think?
I think, like, depending on what tools they build, I have no idea what Leemonade has in his head, man. That guy's bizarre, right? It could be some like crazy thing, some very like, you know, low level piece of code. I don't know. But it could also be like an NFT marketplace. Now, that's like the main thing that I feel like has had huge traction, and that could push TPS up. Maybe if like a secondary market were to open up and Swirls were to create that marketplace, yeah, sure. Anything else would probably just be it would support other things that would bump up the price.
I think that one of the things that is unique to Hedera is that the news around Hedera doesn't pump Hedera. And I think a big part of that is because Hedera doesn't have a DeFi ecosystem yet. It's just building it. And people who are in the other chains, in the other networks right now, the news that they're looking for doesn't exist on Hedera, right? The things that people want from a DeFi coin, from a DeFi ecosystem, are things like staking and APY and shitcoin casinos and ICOs and NFTs, and Hedera doesn't really have those yet. And we're only just seeing the NFT marketplace on Hedera take off. And maybe in the next 6 to 8 months, now that smart contracts are out, maybe we will see some more adoption from the DeFi sphere into Hedera. And I think that that's their plan, which is get smart contracts out and then ramp up the marketing so that all of the Solidity developers in Ethereum and Solana and Matic, they all come to Hedera, or at least they're more comfortable coming to Hedera and checking it out and taking advantage of the technology so that DeFi takes off. And I think that, if we're talking about enterprise-focused news with banks doing remittances on Hedera, or the code going open source, or things that are bullish for enterprises, I don't think those will move the market in the short term. I think that the last year has kind of proven that HBAR doesn't really care, But I think that DeFi coming to Hedera might, and if we see a coin swap, like a DEX, come up in the Hedera space, that might just be the catalyst that pumps the price. And that's just my thought, is that could happen. I don't actually have any idea of how all these pricing things works. That's not my sphere.
Well, I mean, it's good to bring up that there are certain things that we and other people would want to see, that being one of them.
Are we feeling saucy for saucer swap?
Definitely on the right track, like with everything like May was talking about. Like, hopefully it just brings more eyes to everything we already know.
I've been liking their tweets. I don't really read all of them, but them explaining some basic DeFi concepts, which I feel like a boomer reading it. But now I feel educated. Shout out Saucer Swap.
Is that your
like
cat?
The liquidity pools.
Does that sound your cat, May?
She has been purring this entire time. It is entirely possible.
I just hear like.
Yeah, she sounds like she's charging at times, like she's a battery charging, because her purring kind of has this inflection to it. So yeah, that's probably her. I apologize.
I hope our listeners can hear that.
I will say that the NFT marketplace on Hedera, the whole culture, is really interesting. It's cool to see that it's taken on a life of its own. I don't know what other people do, what other networks have done in which they haven't had a marketplace, but really scrappy community, really fun, really interesting. I'm really curious to see what happens from here, and what'll happen when actual infrastructure or more infrastructure is built for it.
Yeah.
Speaking of infrastructure, let me just plug HashPack for a second. On the NFT front, we are going to be releasing a new feature for HashPack called Secure Trade. And Secure Trade is going to let you swap an NFT for HBAR with another user. And basically, this is going to open up secondary trades for the entire market. And so up until this point, people have been buying and selling their NFTs through trust of the seller, where they send the seller however much HBAR, and then the seller then sends them the NFT. With secure trade that we're putting in, now it's done in one transaction, and if the buyer doesn't sign off on the transaction and doesn't send their HBAR over, then the NFT doesn't get transferred. So it's all going to be happening as an atomic swap. And so that's just one of the things that is coming up in the NFT space that's going to really kick it off. And I think that there's going to be a lot of new developments in the next 6 months that are going to show a lot of promise for the DeFi space.
I mean, as a NFT creator, I'm extremely excited about it. Listeners probably want to know, can you give us any idea when this generally might roll out? Soon.
I think the official term that we've put onto our app is very soon.
Oh, so maybe 2 weeks. This just in. While we were recording the podcast, it was announced that HashPack's Secure Trade is live. I repeat, HashPack's Secure Trade is live.
What specific thing or product would help your ability to sell NFTs?
Oh, I mean, yeah. I mean, this kind of thing with a secondary marketplace. The main thing that's been holding things up is some people like me put royalty amounts on their NFTs, and they can't be transferred from wallet to wallet just by individuals with the royalties being added. So, people buy NFTs in a large part, and this may be surprising to some listeners, to sell them later for more money. And so we have a lot of people who have purchased the first, series 0 of my creates, who, those are all gone. And now that the next series is out, they might want to sell those to new collectors who are coming in for the first time. And they haven't been able to do that. And it's the same with everybody who's put royalties on their NFTs, which is most creators I've found. So that's kind of it's held up a lot of money. It's held up a lot of HBAR in this market. That, combined with some other things that have happened, has kind of put a standstill on the development of the NFT community and the success of it. But like you were saying, DPAK, very scrappy bunch. We're trying to, all these talented people that just happen to be associated with this NFT community are trying to, in their own way, fill the gaps that come up as they come up. So I'm very excited for the future, and I'm also very excited for HashPack's announcements and the fact that HashPack is the place that I use to send NFTs right now, and in a time when I couldn't really facilitate that, and I don't think currently you can send it through any other wallet. I've been very grateful for them.
Big shout out HashPack.
Big shout out HashPack as always.
It'd be cool to have like an automated bidding system. I don't know how you would do that. Like if everybody would just be like, I send in this amount and there's like some sort of escrow or something, and then the winning amount gets sent to the seller, and then like all the losing bids just get sent back to your own wallet.
I think that
right.
there's probably a way to do it even without escrow. The question is who's going to build it. I don't think the question is if you can build it or how to build it. Well, maybe how, but the real question is who's going to build it. And I think that there's a lot of people who are very excited about auction technology and implementing that sort of thing. And I think it's just a matter of time before we can have that sort of solution that you're talking about, Hashgraphian. And I also don't think it needs to be escrow, just like a lot of the things that we're trying to build right now in the marketplace. There's NFT marketplaces right now that are trying to build a marketplace solution that is not escrow, right? And that's uncommon. That's maybe not even possible on other chains, but here we have people who are saying we don't want to hold a seller's NFT. We don't want to do anything with that. So we're going to build a market that allows the sellers to send their NFTs to the buyers directly. And it's very cool that there are people who are building this.
Yeah,
like a decentralized eBay. The auction system would be like a time limit. And
didn't Hedera do something along those lines with that initial charity auction that they did a while back?
Yeah.
Do you guys remember that when they did the book and the coins and whatnot?
Yeah, it was really cool.
And it refunded immediately when the new bid came in?
Oh.
Yeah, I don't have that technology. Currently, when I do limited NFT auctions, I just hold them on my Discord and people post, and
right.
It's honestly everybody's very civil. I do know HashAxis is trying to, they haven't yet, but is attempting to implement auction functions on their site. So I'll give them a shout out for that. But I wanted to...
Hedera. Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. Well, I was going to give the mic to you anyway. I wanted to know more about how you feel or your thoughts on DeFi on Hedera being impacted by this open source news, Hashgraphian.
I think it can only be positive. Well, obviously, not everything can only be positive, but I think it's going to overall be a positive development. There's going to be bumps in the road with anything, but hopefully it just brings more eyes. Honestly, I think it's not the open source thing that's going to push DeFi the most. Like, the big thing is smart contracts 2.0, and there's so many people who've been waiting on that development. Like I know the Hashgraph exchange, they've really wanted that for like liquidity pools on Hedera. And I know like you can do a lot of stuff without smart contracts on Hedera. You just got to be a lot more creative about it. But the thing with smart contracts is that there's been years of development of like doing it the traditional way, so it'll be easier for people to jump in with things they already know. And then they maybe introduces them into like the Hedera way of doing things and being like, oh, maybe I don't need a smart contract to do this. And it would actually be safer because smart contracts can sometimes be compromised. The code needs to be audited, and it can be weird sometimes. Like we've all seen like the FDAO hack or just various compromises like that. And having specific services on Hedera seems to be a more secure way to tackle those sorts of issues too.
Great points.
Fantastic points. Well, I think that about covers it. I think that was a good way to end it, a good wrap up. Thank you so much to the panel for being here. I really appreciate it. I think that Hashgraphian in particular really added a lot to this episode, so I'd like to give you the privilege of sharing your Twitter handle with the world.
Oh my God. It's just at Hashgraphian.
Give him a follow.
Trying my best.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel, following us on Twitter at Hedera HashCast, and supporting us via Patreon. Thank you for listening and for helping to build a consensus in the Hedera community.